Sometimes we go through these seasons of our lives where we don't really understand what our purpose is or what God is doing. Where it feels like we're walking and it's dark and desolate and confusing, barren, like a desert or like a wilderness. But the truth of the matter is, there's beauty in that wilderness. It's this picture of this big forest. You're walking into trees and it's dark and confusing and you don't know where you're going. But then you see a glimmer of light. It's a symbol of hope. And as you walk deeper into the forest and the wilderness, you see that there's beauty. Because in those seasons where we don't know where God is taking us and we don't know what the bigger picture is, God is working, He's moving, He is faithful, and He's in control. And as we trust that and walk in that victory and walk in that faithfully with freedom, we'll be able to look back in years to come and say, wow, because God's weaving together a greater narrative than just what He's doing with us. And all He wants is our hearts. As Americans and as Western culture thinkers, we think that in order to make a difference, to make an impact, to change the world, we need numbers, we need money, we need mass production and lots of content. But the way the kingdom is being faithful to the mundane things and the small things and letting God do the rest, putting it all in His hands and letting Him work everything out. What matters is our relationship with the Lord. It's abiding in the vine of Christ, and it's in walking in God's love and letting Him work out the rest of it. Don't be discouraged when you find yourself walking into a wilderness, when you find yourself in a desert that seems confusing and barren and desolate. Know that there's beauty to be found there. There's beauty to be found in that wilderness. Instead of needing to see the bigger picture, instead of needing to know what God's overall vision is, I think He wants us to just walk into it step by step faithfully, not needing to know what the outcome is, but in dependency and trust, knowing that where He's taking us is a very good place. And it doesn't even have anything to do with us. It has to do with Him and lifting His name high and exalting His name. As we commune with the Father and as we tap into His love, His goodness, His kindness, and He draws us into a place of tenderness to live out our faith, to walk in the ways of righteousness, in the ways of holiness, in the ways of purity, in those things, God will prepare us to use us in the way that He sees best fit, regardless of what season we're in, regardless of what context we're in. We go into a season that feels like a wilderness or a desert, and it seems like we don't know what's going on, when the promised land is right around the corner. And instead of doubting God in those times, instead of letting the voice of discouragement and the voice of fear reign and rule, we need to trust that God, in His timing, His promises come to pass. And if He's leading you somewhere, if He's taking you somewhere, and if He is truly the source of the promise He gave you, that promise will come to pass. In the Bible, God says that He who began a good work in you is faithful to complete it. If God has established something inside of you and He's with you, He's going to grow you into fruition. It's like He's the one who does the harvesting. We're supposed to plant seeds, we're supposed to water them, but it's all in God's timing and His providence, because He sees the entirety of the picture and we only see a little bit. Those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. And so part of walking in the fullness and the freedom of Christ and living in that truth is listening to the voice of the Spirit. And when He prompts you to do something, even as small as it might feel, acting in obedience as to what He prompts you is laying the foundation for God to change the world. It's all about being faithful in the mundane things and just walking with the Lord and trusting the Lord and living by His guiding step, that the world will get changed. It's this idea that like a 30 or 40-year-old father wants to change the world, and he feels like the only way he can change the world is if he speaks to crowds of 50,000 people, 60,000, speaking truth and converting people to the faith and all this stuff. But maybe God's greatest purpose for that man is to pour into his son, to teach his son what it means to be a man of God, to live in love and be an example for his son, so that his son would be the one who would go and share the message with 50,000. And the father could have fulfilled his purpose without having to get in front of a crowd at all. But the way that we think about it sometimes is so different than the way God wants to use it. So just be encouraged, because the Lord is faithful. And do not grow weary in doing good. If you're in the wilderness, know that there's beauty that God is making in that season. And there are things in you that he is harvesting, that he's growing, that he's stretching, but there's so much beauty to be found in it as long as you trust him and you know that he's all that you need. His relationship will sustain you. In his timing, his promises will come to pass, for he's a good God. So walking in this fullness of the Spirit of God, living in the fruit of the Lord, love, joy, and peace, and self-control, like there's so much to be felt and to be lived out. And sometimes it might have nothing to do with what you thought it had to do with. Continue living in fullness and freedom, because those who the Son has set free are free indeed.